In favor? Carried. Okay, public comments. That's you, Kylie.
Okay, thanks, Will. Hi, everyone. I know some of you I don't. My name's Kylie. I'm showing up today, I suppose, to share what's going on with me and then with a little bit of an ask for you, the committee. So just to give a little brief overview, what I'm currently creating right now is an environmental education and stewardship action plan. That's a long title. And I just want to give you a little bit of backstory about where this is coming from. So I'm guessing that a lot of you might be aware of the current conflict that's going on over trail use on Mount Gardner. There's been some conflict over motorized versus non-motorized use. And through that process, I was invited to be involved with the group Bowen Can. I'm not sure if you're all aware of them. It's Bowen Community and Nature. And so through my involvement in that situation, I came to realize that there was a gap happening in terms of stewardship specifically to Mount Gardner, right? So there was, and again, I'm not sure how much you guys know. I'm assuming you know, but anyways, there's the three groups that represent work being done on Mount Gardner, and they have partnership agreements with the province. And what happened is the motorized enclave sort of partnered with the province and made a decision that they wanted to develop it as a motorized recreational area. And they, within their partnership, they took on stewardship activities and a leadership role in the stewardship of Mount Gardner. And so what that sort of sparked in me was, well, how did that happen? How did that come to be? And so through my sort of understanding the history of how trails have been developed on Mount Gardner, I came to realize that for years, there have been other groups on the island, such as Rotary, such as the Trail Society, that were sort of advocating for more stewardship on Mount Gardner, but the community at large didn't really engage. And so what I saw sort of coming from this was that there's still a lack of engagement with regards to our community showing up for stewardship activities. And so that inspired me to start working on a community engagement plan for stewardship of Mount Gardner. So it started with Mount Gardner, but what happened is in my research for that project, I started digging into all of our plans, the OCP, the Parks Plan, the Climate Action Plan, all the plans. And what I realized is that we have a plethora of amazing plans and ideas, and it feels like our community, weirdly enough, generally is on the same page with a lot of things. But what I noticed was that there wasn't enough projects for our community to engage in to support these plans. So a lot of our planning documents want community engagement, but they don't actually have the action and strategy part to get the community engaged. And so that's sort of what has got me inspired these days. And so where I'm at with it is I started, as I was working on it, it just became bigger than one person could manage. Because it started to broaden out from Mount Gardner. It's like, well, how are we stewarding all of our lands and our shorelines? And so what I've been doing to date is making connections with all of what I think are the interest groups, with Bonny at the municipality, with the Nature Club, with the Trail Society, with the Conservancy, with the, all the different interest groups. And what I'm interested in forming is some kind of Bowen stewardship group that is basically, it's not necessarily a group that has any authority, but it's a liaison, it's a communication. Because what I've seen happening on Bowen is that all these groups exist, but they operate in silos. There's no interconnected, or not enough. I mean, there is some, but to me, there's not enough interconnectedness. And what I also see happening in each of these individual groups is that it's the few who are showing up to do the many activities. And so I'm really inspired to develop and create more projects and programming, and like in collaboration with all these individual various groups, to get more people on board, more people involved. And so Yeah, I would really like the outcome I would like to see is number one, as I've already said, to have the community more engaged, but number two, to take some of our planning documents and actually create projects and programming that helps implement some of the objectives that are sitting in these documents. And so I have a lot more I could say in terms of what that might look like, but I think just my ask today is actually simple, I hope. I'm curious, number one, what you think of this idea. Do you see a group or an organization like this being effective? Is it possible for there to be a group that is a liaison between all these silo groups? And number two, how would you see a group such as this being able to support the mandate of your committee? And how might that work?
Okay. Thank you, Kylie. I think you've given us a bunch of things to ruminate on and to think on. And I think we're going to have to spend some time discussing this as a committee. From my point of view, I think there's lots of merit in what you're planning to do. So I think that's as far as I can go at the moment. We've got staff here. Any comments from Bonny or others?
We could add it as an agenda item at our next meeting, perhaps. That would be a step, and we could discuss the two items that Kylie had brought up at the end. Yep. And just see what the committee feels about those two questions.
I think that's a great idea. So any other comments from committee members, just very quickly? Don?
Kylie, thanks very much. I love your enthusiasm, and it's an ambitious project, and I'm not sure either what to think, but I love what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Kylie. I think we will put this on our agenda and discuss it further.
Okay, great. Thank you for your time, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thanks, Kylie. One comment,
Sure.
Kylie. So thanks for this, Kylie. To put this on our agenda, it would be good if you had something written. Like if you could put down, who you've talked to, and just explain your ideas a little bit. So just so that it helps folks prepare for a meeting by having something written to have a look at and to have a
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So I think send that to Steph, I think would be the best thing. And that way it'll get to all of us.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay,
thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay. Do we need to discuss this any further now? I think we've got it on, we'll put it on the agenda for next meeting. Dawn?
I'm surprised she's not on our committee.
Yeah.
Great demographics.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess we'll go on to I guess it's Daniel and the green building standards. Hi, Daniel. Welcome.
Thank you. So in terms of, I'm not quite sure how the committee best wants to proceed with this one. I think I presented the staff report in the October meeting and we discussed. And so I don't know if you want the same presentation again, or if you just want to dive straight into questions that you have.
I think for brevity, we should just dive into questions. Sure. Now, the documentation that was included with the agenda is somewhat different from the original documentation. So has it have things proceeded since your presentation to us?
No, I mean, essentially we've been waiting until we've finished all the committee presentations. So I'm just looking at the agenda, and I know, so the A is like our current policy that's adopted by council that we've had since 2007. Then B would just be the council minutes. C is the staff report that was presented to council. And then D is the presentation that I've given to committee. So that's what I presented to you in October.
Okay. So I could lead off with my comments on the presentation, the original presentation. Looking at the policy objectives look great to me. I'd like them as stated. Looking at the that stuff about applying. The number 2, green building standards. There's a list of A to G of different frameworks and standards. And I just am wondering, could you include conservation development standards in that as well?
Yes, I mean, is there one in particular you're thinking of that is like a accredited standard?
Yeah,
and that's the goal. And I know then also, like in my discussion, I think with the APC and their committee discussion, their recommendation was just not to have the list, but have, you know, that it just be open to externally verified frameworks, you know, maybe like as identified by staff, so that then it's not even as prescribed, because we know part of the problem with our current policy is that it sets standards and levels of those, and then the standards move, or some of them expire and they go away, and then we're left with something that's not as workable. So leaving it even more, like one would just be, you know, have a more encompassing list, or the other would just be like not have a list and just say, it's going to be externally verified. So it's something we can check and it's going to achieve things, but it'll be determined, you know, each time.
I see David looks like he's itching to say something.
You're just muted, David.
David, you're muted.
Yeah, got it. The one thing, this is great, and I probably agree with the APC's worry about, okay, if you try to list everything, then there's bound to be something missing. But the Metro Vancouver actually did some work on this, and one of the concerns was that the step code is great, except that it doesn't necessarily lead to zero emissions. And with the zero emissions, because what you could do is you could have a super energy efficient house, but you know, you could be heated, well, in the city, you could be heated by natural gas, but for us, you could have, say, a propane heater that boils water or heats up water and have a heated floor, or just a propane fireplace. So you could have a super energy efficient house, but your energy source could still be a fossil fuel. So Metro Vancouver has ended up sending a letter to the province asking for that to be adjusted to make sure that the goal is zero emissions. In other words, to make some adjustments about not just energy efficiency, but also the fuel. So we could say something like that, is that the goal, if you do have a net zero house, if you go right to the end, yeah, that would be net zero, but all of the other stages, stage 3, stage 4, you could have actually more emissions than if you had simply, you know, not a very good house, but a heat pump. And as your heat source. So I think we need a zero emissions in there. So I just got to go back to the document. That's why I was got to go and have a look at it.
Yeah.
Do you want to share it?
I've got it in front of me now. Strongly encouraged to exceed the required step, blah, blah, blah. Particularly net zero ready, provincial goals. Yeah, I guess I'd like something about zero emissions in there. You know, we'd like a house to be zero emissions. A friend was just building a house, and she was looking at different options, and she was going to have propane to, you know, provide some heat. And I was saying, no, go all electricity. And then she, you know, fiddled around, and yeah, she's going all electricity. And so, you know, she's now zero emission from, it's a good house, but it's now zero emission when it could have been some emissions. So I'd like zero emission in there somehow. I don't know. I'm not going to try to wordsmith it right now to slap it in.
Yeah.
I'm just going to include it as a bullet under comments that the community has.
And Daniel, I've got another question kind of following from what David is saying there. Is this policy entirely focused on the building or on the lot as well? The reason the model I'm having is David's talking about building a really high energy efficient house and heating it with propane or something. My thought is building a high energy house and then clear cutting your lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you're not only not zero emissions, really, you're taking away a whole bunch of carbon sequestration, and that will be ongoing with the tree canopy that was gone will not be sucking in and storing carbon dioxide.
Yeah, so the intent of this policy is specific to the building. So it's not trying to get into, we have other sort of regulatory tools around like site clearing or conservation goals at time of rezoning, but this is specific to like building performance.
Okay, I'd really strongly suggest that we that the building and the property be closely associated. It's again that scenario that I was saying of going to all this work to have this highly energy efficient house with zero emissions and cutting into the carbon sequestration is, I think, would be a mistake. I've got a few more questions, I guess. The wording is strongly suggest and that kind of thing. Could it be changed to require that these steps are required, not strongly recommended?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a policy that relates specifically like to council and it's council's consideration at time of rezoning. And so to some extent, it's, it's like council's level of, well, is council going to require it as part of their like discretionary approval? Yeah,
we've declared a climate emergency and all these things, and I just think the idea of strongly recommending in an emergency isn't the as strong as it could be. Right. So that's maybe a question for council rather than for you, Daniel.
I think I'm just looking at, like I've seen in our existing policy, it says strongly encouraged.
Yeah.
And so I think I've just copied that same wording.
Yeah. So that's the comment I have there.
I'd like to just respond to Will's comment. I think your point is great, Will. I like both of the points you're raising. But on the first one, I mean, Daniel's right. This is about the building. On your second one, I mean, what you would be saying is that, and this is a good logical statement, is that, okay, you're building a house. It's going to last more than 30 years. It's got to be zero in 30 years from now. So why not start now? But the trouble is, I mean, we simply can't get out there and say right now, Will, okay, anyone who's building a house from now on has to be zero emissions. I mean, we just can't. So I agree that strongly encourage is pretty wishy-washy compared to what needs to be done, but I don't really have an alternative in mind, but you're raising a good point.
Some of it I think comes into too, like how consistently it's applied by, partly by staff and by council. So it could say require, but council doesn't have to, abide by it. They may say, well, in this circumstance of this rezoning, well, it doesn't make sense for these reasons. And if that's sort of the expectation going forward, it could say require, but if it's not being actively used, it doesn't get implemented.
Okay. The other another comment I have in the original document that I'm looking at, there's the background section, and it identifies 4 sections of the OCP that this policy follows, and I hope that will remain. I think, you know, the OCP is the important document that lasts longer than a council. It lasts at least 10 years, and in reality much longer. And so referring to that document to bolster the policy, or to show that you're taking guidance from the OCP, I think is a really valuable thing. I'd hate to see it gone.
Sure, and that's in that like the staff background report is showing that.
Yeah.
So it looks like the policy itself would be quoting from it, but we sort of laid it out as that's where the basis for this policy comes from, is supported by the OCP.
Yeah.
And and that's a key piece.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think that Maureen has her hand up.
Yep. Okay, Maureen, please.
I agree with much of what David had to say, but I also think that if it's the feeling of this committee that a stronger statement in the policy itself would be preferable, that in providing feedback to Daniel, that the committee provide that feedback rather than council preventing that feedback from going to the rest of council. And does that make sense, David? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Maureen. And I slapped my hand up again because I'm sort of thinking about this a little bit more and agreeing, you know, that Will's point is a good one, and we need to do a little more on this. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping the queue because there are other folks ahead of me, but to say actually a net zero house in the rest of BC is hard. A net zero house on Bone is pretty simple. All it means is it's electric, nothing else. It means you don't have propane, and that's not all that hard. So anyway, I agree with Maureen's statement. Yeah.
So I'm going to, Bonny, you've been waiting. I'll get Bonny's input, and then I think we've got to make some decision about David's suggestion there, or Maureen's suggestion. Go ahead, Bonny.
Daniel, I just wanted to ask, under the green building standards, there's a list of LEED and all sorts of different certifications. Now, one of them is salmon safe certification. And to me, like going back to kind of what Will was talking about, the clear cutting, and it's just to deal with the building itself. I have that question, like, how does that then relate to the building itself, the salmon safe? And if in fact, then could we kind of extend maybe that list? I mean, it says not limited to, but I think if we're going to talk about salmon safe practices or certification, perhaps we want to talk about green shore certification, or soft shoring, or alternative shoreline soft shore ecological approach to shoreline modifications. That's too wordy, but I think if we're going to say salmon safe certification, I would like to know how that links to the building, because if we are going to just keep it to the building, does that fit, or does that kind of then extend the scope per se? So, but if we are going to use salmon safe, I think we probably should have green shore in there, because often the shoreline alterations are linked to the building.
Yeah, and I'll admit I don't know a whole lot about the salmon safe certification, but my preference and recommendation would be then like, especially if we're moving it to remove the list, is that we're focused on the building. Like, this policy is for the building. It's not for the site, and there's sort of other tools. And like, I'd rather have this one be a tightly focused policy that's clear what it's going for, and we use the other tools appropriate that we have available for sort of the rest of the site development.
I guess my question then would be if there's any language in any other policy about green shores and soft shore options. And as we move forward with storm surges and climate change, sea level rise, I just attended a webinar on that, and we need to address armoring and our shoreline being an island. So I guess it's just that I don't think it's in any of our other policies. So I mean, it'd be great to rely on other policies, and if there is a gap there, then we just need to, look at that and explore where we could fit that language in, I think.
And I know, like, some of the things, like almost the driver for things like the step code from the province, or that things often, like standards often start off targeted and then expand. So I know, like when I was in school, lead was like the big thing, but it seems like then people will lead chase and you get points for, you put in a bike room, or you do something to your building that gets you LEED certified, even though you're not necessarily, the goal originally was energy efficiency. But then you do sort of other things that are, worthwhile things, but you've lost your goal of, well, we wanted energy efficient buildings.
Yeah.
And the same thing sort of applies here. It's like the wider, you can spread it wider, but then maybe you're losing your targeted goal.
Yeah. And I guess this is just sort of a question, is just sort of popped into my head, was that, is a green building standard, does that evoke the frame of reference being energy efficiency? Are those two aligned, those two statements, energy efficiency and green building? To me, when I think green building, I kind of think of a green roof. That's my frame of reference, sort of. It's not necessarily energy efficiency. So I don't know, I know that's the terminology out there. It's just a question. It's just, I'm always looking at frames of reference and how words are used and how they're perceived.
I think that's an excellent question, Bonnie, is do we have a clean, clear definition of what green building is, and is it the same as energy efficient or zero carbon? We've got three three names there.
I mean, I think that's the bigger question too. It's like, can a detached home on a 5-acre lot where people have to drive to and from, even if it has solar panels and it's net zero, is that still a green building? But maybe that's a bigger question about land use practices on Bonny Island.
So you're probably leading to the point of energy efficient or zero carbon is the or net zero carbon is what we're talking here.
Yeah, for this policy.
Yeah, okay. Now, can we go back to what David and Maureen had brought up, is does the committee want to officially say we'd like to see stronger wording than whatever it is, the strongly recommend or whatever term?
Let me just share my screen, Will. See what notes.
Okay.
I don't know that people are agreeing on this, but those were the suggestions.
Looks good to me.
And
any comments from others?
I was going to say, Steph, could the third point, instead of for example, but like strengthen the language used, including changing strongly encouraged to be required or something, so that you're not strongly suggesting that it should be no longer strongly suggest. But...
Sorry, is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. To be instead of should be.
And then I don't believe that the second bullet, you're a fan of that, Daniel. Is that? So.
I think
guess it's
instead
like,
I'd suggest instead of include, say, link to or something like that in the second bullet. And Daniel, I assume that a lot of those policies aren't in effect yet, but it would be nice to see them. So, you know, in your spare time.
yeah, and I guess,
saying that
you know, I
with a
would point to
smile.
like we currently have the development permit if you're in a watershed, and we
Yeah.
have a work plan underway to develop a site alteration bylaw on hazardous slopes.
Yeah.
Hazardous areas, sorry. So in terms of, you know, developing those, that work would be underway. Yeah. And then I'd say just in general, it's like we have policies in the OCP about at time of rezoning, seeking amenity contributions, including park dedication and conservation covenants.
Yeah.
So we have, you know, those are sort of the pieces that would capture some of the development.
Great.
May I
Any
ask-
comments from Maureen? I see your hand up.
Yeah, going back to Bonnie's question about green buildings and what the titling of this policy evokes for people, and whether the policy should be renamed. I mean, if it is focused on moving towards, you know, zero emission buildings, whether, you know, like, is there another name that would be clearer and reflect the content of the policy as it stands?
Right, like if it just said energy efficiency building standards for residential rezoning,
Yeah,
and it's pretty clear what we're doing.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
agreed.
Energy, what did you say? Energy?
Energy of efficiency or efficient standards for residential rezoning, or just for rezoning.
Yeah.
Take out residential, but just
Yeah.
for rezoning.
Rezoning.
That would be so much more clear.
Yeah.
Green buildings
Yes.
sounds a little woolly and a couple of decades ago,
Yeah.
whereas the energy efficiency name, you'd know what you were looking at there.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't look at the policy and think there's a bunch of stuff that should be in here that isn't in here.
But do we want to capture things like we're talking about water usage in here, so it isn't just energy efficiency standards? I kind of feel like the step code captures a lot of the energy efficiency standards, whereas this is just a step above, but there are other things in terms of environmental impacts and water usage.
So what would you suggest then, Carla?
I don't know. Green building standards. But I don't think water usage is captured in any other policy. Oh, yeah.
Water conservation and other things.
I know. And it should be building standards, I guess, for rezoning. Like,
Conservation.
I know, because the other option is then to do something where you're like conservation building standard or something that's trying to capture it all. But then you just you work around and come back to green or sustainable something.
So Daniel, do you see, can you clarify, do you see that water conservation is part of this policy?
I mean, we've given it as things that people can propose. And in part, some of that is like, well, we're at, you know, we require step 3 of the step code now. So in theory, somebody could apply and we could say, okay, you need to hit step 4, right? Like your buildings need to be built step 4, or they need to be built to step 5 of the step code for rezoning. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot, you know, it's like those are sort of the boxes we can tick for the step code if it's about that. Or like when the province or we move to step 4, then our options are, well, people rezone, they have to do step 5. And that's kind of the limit of what the policy would be. And so this would say, well, maybe we say, okay, you go, you're going to do step 4, but you're just going to do something else additional. So we're sort of tacking on. It's like a this and this, like maybe step 4 does something and we're happy, but if you can also do, you're also looking at water conservation. There's something else that they're considering as well. That's how I would see it working.
Yeah, because I just don't see any other details about water conservation in the documentation than I guess what's hidden away in step code. Is that?
I'd like to, maybe I put my hand up, I'm not sure, but I'd like to comment here. I'm looking back to, I've got the policy on my screen here. It's our Green Building Standard Policy. Applicants for rezoning are strongly encouraged to exceed the required step of the BC Energy Step Code, and in particular be net zero energy ready per provincial goals. Projects may exceed minimum performance requirements in energy use, water usage, or environmental impacts. And then it's got measured by a whole bunch of things. But if we ditch those things, we're mentioning 3 important things. Environmental impacts, for instance, there's a bunch of work being done right now on buildings. And if you build them prefab, build the pieces prefab, there's way lower environmental impacts. So, that's a way of having a lower, because there's way less waste in a house where, you're building the panels in a factory and then bringing them over, rather than, buying a whole bunch of 2x4s and then cutting half of them off and throwing them in Mike's bin. So there are other things that are mentioned: energy use, water usage, or environmental impacts. There's all kinds of things that people could do under those 3 things. So I in that sense, green buildings fits. So I'm liking it. It's okay. Like I completely agreed with Bonnie's point for a while, and I was ready to and Maureen's point. But then when I looked at it again, it mentions these other things, and there are ways of improving the embodied energy and and the waste in buildings. That's for sure. Huge amount that can be done.
And does that include material use too, David?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, yeah.
Okay, Bonnie's got her hand up.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because David, I do see that point. Is there, just putting out there again a question, like, could we have climate in the title somehow, like climate smart? Because is that, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's getting to belaboring the point, but for me, green is a bit jargonish.
Yep.
I would like to have clarity on what that meant, and sort of, yeah, I don't know, but it could fit to it. David, your point's well taken, and I'm not attached to it. It's just a question out there how we could enhance clarity. And it's a policy is about education, right? And a title is important. So yeah, green's okay too.
I guess that, or we just go straight and just go, it's a buildings standard policy, and you have to read it to know what the standards are.
Secret. We'll just call it a policy.
How about Jeff and Don? Do you have any input on this conversation?
I'm staying out of this one.
I'm just enjoying the conversation and the points here. I would probably feel good about, or seem it's appropriate, that title that Steph's come up with around energy efficiency, water conservation, and environmental impacts building standards. It's a mouthful, but it's very specific to what the content of the policy is.
And Steph, just on that, could you then cut the for rezoning and just put policy? Because I realized I'd read out for rezoning on the old policy, and we dropped that because we leave it open to applying it in a variance application. And so I was thinking in terms of where that would be applicable. I was thinking about it before presenting today. Is like, we currently have councils considering a variance permit on the South Coast where they're seeking an increase in the lot coverage. And I was thinking, well, if we had this policy in place, one of the things staff could be saying as well, you're increasing the lot coverage, but as a condition of that, we want a higher step of the step code. So you can have the variance, but one condition would you build a step 4 building instead of a step 3 building, or something like that, where something else where council has a discretionary approval and can tie this in. It's not just a rezoning.
Yeah, Daniel, I like the direction that this title is going in. Just a question on the water conservation point. What guidance does this policy provide?
Sorry, Maureen, what guidance does the policy provide?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, beyond that saying, you know, it may exceed minimum performance requirements in water usage.
I mean, as a councillor, I mean, water conservation, of course, is a good thing, but in practice, what would this mean? Does this mean cisterns? Does this mean what?
Yeah, I mean, I know. So, like some of the, I think the Evergreen development has a covenant on it that we placed on that rezoning, and one of the things it requires is cisterns and low flow, like toilets and shower heads and whatever else. So it could mean, you know, standards like that are placed on at time of rezoning.
Mhm.
I think.
Aren't
Oh, is that
Go
okay?
ahead.
Sorry. One other example is just that gray water, we're not allowed to use gray water right now, but I think in the future we will be able to. So even though there's not a standard listed for that, I think eventually there should be one.
Daniel and or David, aren't there off-the-shelf standards for water conservation out there, put out by federal, provincial agencies?
I believe so, and I mean that would be my preference going forward too. Is like, so like the Evergreen one, we obviously have this covenant that, you know, the developer and the municipality drafted. They have to do a building permit, but it would be much cleaner if there was a standard. We can say, okay, you need to meet this standard, and you have a,
Yeah,
you know, somebody certifying it, and they can say, yes, I've met this standard, as opposed to right now when the Evergreen comes in and we have to look through the like what they're putting in and installing and manually check all of it.
Yeah, something that could be included with that list of standards for green building.
Yeah,
I think that if there was some approved standards out there, I think that would be great to reference them.
Sorry, was that reference standards regarding?
Water conservation.
Yeah, okay.
I'm starting to worry that it's going to start becoming too detailed and specific. And part of Daniel's objective was that this lasts a while. Yep. And standards are going to pop up and then going to be improved. But really what we want is those three things. We want energy conservation, water conservation, and general environment, whatever the third one was, I forget. But yeah. And like to Maureen's question, the policy doesn't give folks guidance as to what they should do. But like Carla was saying, somebody could start, okay, we're going to do some work on gray water, or we're going to do cisterns. Cisterns would really be appropriate in this area. In other areas, they're less appropriate. So it really depends on the circumstances, the situation, and the standards of the time. I don't know. I don't think we should get into all these details.
So get rid of this bullet.
I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that first.
I see David's point, but again, I'm seeing reference to step code and a whole bunch of other codes that may well be changed sometime in the future too. So what I think we're trying to do is show those three areas, energy efficiency, water conservation, and environmental impact, equal guidance.
Yeah, you make a good point, Will. We talk about the step code, but we don't talk about anything else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're running in
Work
circles.
that reference standards regarding water conservation and include water conservation strategies such as installation of cisterns and possible gray water use. Am I capturing what you guys are?
My thought would be we're getting into too much detail about cisterns and gray water use.
Okay.
And that makes it maybe closer to David's goal of keeping this less detail in there.
Okay.
Yeah, like I think my goal for the policy, and I sort of swing each way, but would just be to end it where it says, you know, there may exceed minimum performance, energy use, water use, environmental impacts measured by following a pre-existing externally verified framework, and just ending it there. But then having some other place where we can include and be like, these are ones that we're aware of, are these, you know, these are current standards that you can consider.
That's pretty powerful. I like that.
Yeah.
And something like that. And then I don't, you know, if it's like gonna be like another page on the policies, it's just like, you know, for information, these are ways that you could meet these standards. Or something where it's giving like people some examples. Yeah.
Like
That's
that.
good.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a list. I'm not clear on this, the list. We talk about, someone was talking about extending the list or removing the list. Is that a comment from this group?
I think now that in the context of what Daniel's just said, maybe that bullet is moot now.
What was your exact statement again, Daniel? I liked it at the time, but now I can't remember exactly how you handled the
So where the green building standards.
Yeah.
So where the first sentence is, it's like strongly encouraged and would say required to exceed the required step of the BC Energy Step Code.
Yeah.
And then projects may exceed minimum performance requirements in energy usage, water usage, or environmental impacts measures by following a pre-existing externally verified framework.
Period.
And just period.
Yeah.
And then have like another page that's like attached to the policy, but it's not policy, that's like guide to applicants or something. And it's like staff are aware of these frameworks, but are open to exploring, you know, what fits best on your proposed development or something.
I think that's great, Daniel. Yeah.
Yep, I like that.
Jeff, did you capture that?
I thought, sorry, I thought we had that. I did get every word, just that, isn't that this bullet? On it.
It goes beyond water conservation.
Okay, sorry. I was looking for the report. Can you, again, Daniel, sorry.
Flipping back and forth between documents where
Yeah, I was trying to get to
requirements in energy usage, water usage, or environmental impacts measured by following a pre-existing externally verified framework, period. So in other words, it's no change, except in ditching the comma such as, but not limited to. And that'll.
I think it's like moving the example standards like to an information page for applicants or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and to get a little flustered. So you want to move the standards examples to an information page for applicants. Is that the comment? And then this is.
You don't need it.
Take this bit out?
Yeah, because it's keeping the page as is until that point.
That's okay.
Okay, good.
Bonnie's got her hand up.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on an iPad and I can't see everybody's hands. Oh, okay, Bonnie, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, just one more comment. Daniel, were we thinking that this would be a checklist for the building permits that people have read? Just I find our Heron policy, I get calls about people because it says in the policy or on the building checklist to contact the manager of environment. And it's been really great to have it on our little checklist, right? So it's, again, the primary goals for education.
I mean, this wouldn't be because this would apply
Right,
like a step before. So it's like if you apply for this, you rezone, you've got covenants on your property that says you have to do it. And then at building permit stage, we're checking and saying if you need to meet these standards. Yeah.
Great.
You know, Bonnie, I think that Jen McGowan wrote a little one pager that's included with the building permit package now that people do take a read through that's similar to a green building standards. I don't know if that's still there. Building and resilience. Have you seen it? I don't know. But it does have a lot of these kinds of things that we're talking, saying like, water conservation, cisterns, like, fire smarting your house and that kind of stuff. There's something there like that.
Yeah. It's just such an effective tool.
That's like, these are ways people can build more efficient buildings.
Yeah.
I don't know how effective it is, but because often by the time people are getting their building permit application, they've kind of decided what their house is going to be.
Right. Yeah.
And they're like, oh, that's nice, but this is the house.
But things like lighting, there's certain lighting and I don't know, there's I don't know. Anyway, it's been really effective to tick off the box for the Heron policy. I just know that. Like, it's just been amazing, the phone calls that I get and the education opportunities.
So any more comments from members of the committee? No. Daniel, hopefully we've been of some help to you or hindrance maybe. But anything else?
Did you kibosh the checklist idea or a different? Yeah. Okay.
No, well, thank you. You've been very helpful. I appreciate all the feedback and the time spent on reviewing this.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Daniel. It's always great to get a presentation and a conversation with you. Thank you.
Excellent. And I think we're just looking for that motion that Steph has drafted.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the motion.
Yes.
Okay, any final comments or changes? Do we have a motion for this? Again, I can't see everybody, so speak up if you.
So moved.
So, seconder?
Sure.
Okay, Jeff, all in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Thank you, Daniel.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Daniel.
Okay, so business arising from the minutes. Review of the ECAC work plan. Bonnie.
Steph, are you able to bring up the version 3 that I just sent you this morning because I adjusted some dates?
Sure.
Great, thank you. That's great, thanks. So the draft work plan, so what has changed from the last version, or the version number 1, this is now version number 3, is the timeline and also the linkage, which is a really important piece that should have been there before, the linkage to the climate action strategy. So, going through the items that we had on our first version, intuitively, I guess we're along, the policy came out of consultation and sort of the collective consciousness of climate action on the island. So it was good, like there were those linkages, didn't have to stretch to find any, commonalities. So that was good. So that's what's detailed in this work plan. I don't know if everybody has reviewed it. I'm open to comments. There are a few highlighted sections. Steph, if you just scroll down to, I think, page 3 or page 2.
Page
there
2,
we go. Yeah, page 2. So this was one of the suggestions. This is a quick win out of the climate action strategy to incorporate an e-bike into the fleet for the municipality. And I don't know, I was just brainstorming and really, really would love your input. Is research e-bike options and associated costs, because I would like to get that in the budget for 2022. But in the meantime, maybe having a little feature or something in our communications about an e-bike user on Bowen, something to that effect. But I would love if somebody could volunteer to work with me, maybe do a bit of research on different e-bike options and costs and that sort of thing, and work on maybe a piece if this is something the committee wants on the work plan. So we'll just scroll down again. That's one area where I'm looking for someone to put their name forward.
I'll volunteer as an e-bike fanatic.
Awesome. I was thinking about that's a good fit.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think it's a great idea. With we'll have that path done by this summer, a big chunk of it, and so suddenly we'll have more opportunity for bike users to feel safe.
That's great. Yeah, and I know there's a couple others. I have a friend who's an avid bike. He doesn't have a car and just bikes all the time. So yeah, anyway, awesome. Thank you so much, Councillor Hocking. Now moving down, just scrolling down, there was another highlighted section.
Page 3.
This is, page 3. This is a big one because this was referred from council, and I did adjust some of the times here because we're not meeting, we've kind of delayed this meeting. So I've adjusted the timeline. That's the difference between version 2 and version 3. That's before you right now. I just adjusted the timeline this morning. So really, I guess the pesticide regulation, we're really looking for a subcommittee, and I would really like to have for our next meeting, names put forward that the subcommittee meets before our next meeting, and so that we can come up with a scope determination or what we would like to see in our in the pesticide document that we're going to produce.
You've got an enthusiastic volunteer here.
I'll help.
Jeff too, I'm in.
That's fabulous, guys. It's super.
Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah, so that's great. Good. So just sort of a rough timeline is here on how we can get this to council. I think realistically we'd be looking at the fall to bring forward a draft. And that's great. There are also some ideas for some climate conversations, and staff can start working on those. I would like to have Kim Stevens, if he so wishes, to come and speak hold a climate conversation on water conservation. He's an islander and wealth of knowledge. Also, too, another idea for another climate conversation is a zero waste, moving towards zero waste, and talking, maybe with someone from the fashion industry or a reuse it person. There was one that I attended. I don't know if Councillor.
Sorry, where do you want me to be on the document?
Oh, sorry. It's just sort of a general comment now.
Okay.
So stuff, yeah, because I have climate conversations in a couple of different areas. Sorry, just
okay.
There. But another one, yeah, there was a fashion, a woman who recycles fashion clothes, and that was an amazing Metro Vancouver climate type conversation that I attended about a year ago. That was amazing. But there is also a couple of islanders that have, one has moved off, but I went to her house and it was just absolutely astounding. I don't know, she had almost zero plastic in her house. But anyway, that was an extreme example, but I think that would be another really good climate conversation.
Yep, sounds good.
It does take a bit to organize. So realistically, maybe 3 this year. That would be, it does take a bit of time, and I'm just always looking at staff capacity.
Yes.
On a climate conversation, Maureen and I had an idea yesterday. We'll develop a little bit and bring forward. And it was around, okay, I guess I'll explain a little bit. Yeah. So council had a meeting yesterday with our MP. And one of the questions I raised with the MP, I was talking about climate change as usual. The question I raised was reading through the federal climate change plan. There are all kinds of chunks that align nicely with what we're trying to do in our plan. And the first bullet in our plan, and I forget the exact words, it's make sure you work with others, because senior levels of government are doing stuff that, our ability to act is limited. So we agreed that we'll have a meeting with, we talked about that at the meeting, and wanting to get more details from our MP about the nature of their climate plan after the budget, which is in 2 weeks from now. And so we're going to meet with him after the budget and go into the details of their plan and how it works to align with our plan and facilitate or make easy a bunch of the things that we're trying to do. And once we've done that, we thought it would be good to have him actually present that as a climate conversation. Talk about, the federal government's climate plan and how it aligns with our climate plan, and the kinds of steps we can start taking now because of what they have. In other words, where there are grants and programs and stuff like that. Okay, so that's an idea we had, but we still have to develop a bit because we haven't had that meeting yet.
Sounds good.
That's great.
So, Bonnie, I notice on page 4, there's another yellow highlight.
Okay. Yes. And this is an important one. Thank you.
Yeah.
So our Sustainable Community Grants deadline is April 15th, fast approaching. To date, I've received 1 application, but I've heard of 2 others that may be coming forward. So it would be fantastic to have a couple of names to look at those, a couple of names on the subcommittee to review as per our criteria.
Well, I'm going to do something terribly unscrupulous. I'm going to, first of all, I'll volunteer, but I'm also going to volunteer McKaylee, even though she's not here, because I think she would be magnificent on that.
That's what happens when you miss meetings.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because she was very helpful, and as was Jeff and others on developing, and Don looking at the criteria, or developing the criteria.
You know how many people it is, Bonnie?
How many people? Sorry.
How many do you need?
Say that again. Sorry, I didn't catch.
Is the criteria relate the number of volunteers needed? Is it 3?
3 would be nice.
Okay.
There's a requirement in terms of the makeup of the committee. An evaluation team of 4 people, including
Okay.
councillor,
Thank you. Thank you.
and 2 members of our committee.
Yeah, perfect.
Sorry, councillor, and then what?
Councillor, a municipal representative, so presumably that's Bonny or Carla, and 2 members of our committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, did I see Jeff and Dawn vying for that position?
Didn't see it. It can happen though.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, happy to help where I can.
Spot.
I would allow Dawn to take that slot just based on timing and my availability alone over the next little
Okay.
bit.
Okay, Don?
Yep. And if you need an alternate, you could put my name down if someone is unavailable.
Thank you for that. That's good. I'd forgotten about that. So that's really good. Yeah.
Just mention, I was speaking with somebody about this grant a couple of days ago, and we looked at the criteria. The criteria say that the applications are accepted up until the 31st of March. So there's some inconsistency in the messaging around the deadline.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out, Maureen. Yeah, we'll change that because our dissemination, our communications definitely say April 15th. So we'll change that in the criteria. Thank you.
Thank you.
So any more comments or suggestions for Bonnie on the work plan?
I got a couple of just minor ones. Bonnie, the very first category is the high level topic categories: water conservation and soil health. Now, those are nicely related when you put them together for things like agriculture and gardening. Are there likely to be some things around soil health that we would add to what we have here already? Is this category about soil health, or is it just about water conservation?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, definitely healthy soil helps in water conservation, but maybe it's mistitled. We're talking about titles today. Maybe just the water conservation title would be better. And if, we have somebody that comes and speaks, there's a chance that maybe even if it was somebody from the Partnership for Water Sustainability in BC, like Kim Stevens, they may talk about soil as part of that, but I think that's a good point. And
one suggestion instead of soil health, I would suggest soil conservation. And that's again, if someone clear cuts their lot and there's going to be lots of erosion if things are not done to conserve that soil. So
yeah, I think that's a good point, Will. I think just though for our work plan, if there's not any items relating to that title, we probably shouldn't have that in the title. So for me, I would prefer now with that comment from Jeff is just having water conservation, but that would be and taking soil, but I'm open.
That sounds good.
And then one more question is around under transportation and item number A, identify ways that ECAC can support BIMTAC initiatives. I'm wondering if there's anything more specific that might be out there that has been identified that we could put in rather than a bit of a catch-all. Maybe this is for David. Is there anything specific that we can be listing other than what's under item number B or letter B, of course? But or is this necessary to keep it broad to be responsive to whatever might arise?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff. I guess keeping it broad is useful. I mean, the idea we already talked about in terms of bicycles is a good one. BIMTAC is all around alternative modes of transportation. A lot of that's on transit, and that's really tough. But the other is bikes and walking.
Councillor, remember last night when the BIMTAC vice chair brought up having a working group?
Yeah.
Do you think incorporating some of those ideas in here, or maybe they could touch base with ECAC members?
Yeah. So BIMTAC last night actually wanted to consider some. BIMTAC has been fairly quiet for the last while because with COVID, transportation needs have just sort of disappeared. The express bus and transportation links, all that kind of stuff just sort of vaporized. And so they were looking at sort of re-energizing their agenda by taking on some projects, but they don't have a project yet. They're going to spend some time with some sort of a workshop perhaps. So I think linking with BIMTAC is what we need to say here.
So you want to include the word link?
Where is it on? I don't see it in the.
So transportation under.
Oh, okay. I think it's probably fine like that. I mean,
okay.
What it means.
You're okay with that, Jeff, then?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'm rethinking what I said. Maybe liaise with BIMTAC would be a good, that's more specific to see what, regarding assistance or something.
No, that brings up an idea based on that idea of liaising with BIMTAC. One of the conversations that I had with with council members that were interviewing chairs of committees is it was brought up. Well, I brought up, and it was mentioned that other committees had mentioned this too, that the idea of more liaising with related committees. And so the other committee that that comes to mind for me that's doing related work is the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Committee. And I'm just wondering if there's any place in this work plan that could be put in if it's thought to be, if others agree that that's a good idea.
I think it's a good idea, yeah.
Maybe in this section.
Yeah.
Or
so just maybe a number D on that list. Liaise with. I look at that spelling of liaise, and it's always one that I trip over. But as a guy that can't spell his own name, has to look in his wallet to find out how to spell his name, I guess I can't speak much on that.
does that make sense what I put here?
Yes, that works for me.
So I guess where appropriate means the environmental piece.
Yeah.
Or environmental related.
Yeah, related. Related to Parks Plan initiatives.
I mean, initiatives within the Parks Plan, because they're trying to be aligned with the Parks Plan, but yeah. Bonnie, are you okay with that?
That's great. That's great. Thanks.
Okay. Anything more? Dawn? McKaylee? No, she's not here. Then I guess it's time for a motion, isn't it?
That the committee recommend that council approve the 2025 ECAC work plan.
A motion?
Yes, presented.
Do we have a
Jeff?
Jeff, seconder? Dawn, all in favor? Carrie. Okay,
Thank you. Got our work cut out for us.
yeah.
That's right.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Yeah, nice work, Bonnie.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Bonnie.
Okay, committee updates, transportation and water advisory committees.
I don't really have
Councillor
anything. Yeah, I don't really have anything, I don't think. As I just mentioned, BIMTAC is going to do a bit of a workshop to try to be a bit more strategic in some of its work. And the water, we had a presentation on water last time, and I don't think there's any new news. I'm not on any water committees. I'm just.
I think I was thinking of your attendance at the West Side one now.
That's right. I attended one of the committees where I live, and I think one of the really interesting things is the identification of aquifers. So, if you're looking at wells, you can see where the staff of, actually consultants have identified sort of the location of aquifers, so that whether new wells are drawing from a different one or the same one. I think generally it's really great work that staff is doing to develop a proper water plan for the island that looks at the making sure that everybody has good water, that there's adequate fire protection, and that there's adequate reserves, financial reserves being put into place to maintain those systems. So it's all really interesting stuff. I encourage anyone to attend the water committees in your own area, because it's work that's well done. I think that's
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thanks, David. And Bonnie, how about Parks, Trails and Greenway Advisory Committee?
Sure, and I'll probably get Carla to chime in too here, but I just wanted to, this isn't really related to Parks Trails, but I just want to, I don't know if anybody, this is backwards probably to you, but it's a development permit brochure that was mailed out to every household on Bowen Island.
Yeah.
And it's just because, there's a lot of retroactive development permits or environmental QEP reports being done when the damage has already been done. So this was just an educational piece, and it sort of lays it out clearly for people what a development permit is and what's required. So that's a good educational piece. But as far as the Parks and Trails Committee, their parks plan, or their work plan has been linked to the parks plan objectives and recommendations. And we're doing a little bit of education. We're writing some educational pieces, some short pieces that we'll disseminate. And that was as per recommendations in the park plan, just to highlight our little known beaches, trails, parks, and also talk about natural capital and special places within our park system on Bowen Island. We're also working on the with Maggie Cummings funding, plus municipal funds as well. But we are doing work at Quarry Park, and the vault has been installed for the pit toilet there. Our park operations fellow is off with injury or surgery and recuperating, but we'll get that done. He's really great, and he will get that finished. Carla's doing lots of work there too. Carla got a slab. It was from the tree, right, Carla? The piece of wood that we're going to use for the new Quarry Park sign.
I asked for a cedar from the where they were cutting them down for the health center. I kind of sneaked in there and
so we've got a nice tree, because the sign is quite old. So we're working on access improvements as well as interpretive materials for both parks, and that's been a two-year project. And we will have a community event this year with the unveiling of the new sign, and yeah, just, highlighting the improvements to that park. In the Parks Plan public consultation, and it definitely by far is our most recognized park system, Headwaters and Quarry, and our most used, I think, as far as municipal parks are concerned. So it's really quite a gem, and it just connects so well to Crown lands. It's a wonderful, wonderful system. And then the last is, and maybe Carla could talk about it, but I think most people are aware that we've been working for many years. Carla has done a lot of work on trying to get this trail. So it's a multi-jurisdictional trail. So BIM had the funds, and it's Metro Vancouver land, and it's also Crown land. And it extends from Killarney Lake, the old bike park there, picnic area, up to Lower Skid Trail. And it's a marvelous trail. So we finally got our Section 57 from the province to do the trail building on their section. And we've been waiting for Metro Parks to just sign off saying we can do work on their land. And Carla can just fill you in with where we're at with that trail. If you could, Carla. Had a couple of delays.
Bonnie, I actually didn't hear like most of what you said because my internet connection.
Oh, okay. I just was.
Yeah. I mean, I can just tell you, anyways. The paperwork from Metro Vancouver was just a little bit late. That was our fault too, though, because we didn't get them everything that they needed necessarily. So we're now into bird nesting season. So Michaeli and I are going to go out on Thursday morning to see if we're going to do a survey and see if we hear any birds out there. And then she's going to do another survey next week. And so if we do find any nesting birds, the trail is not getting built probably until September. So that's too bad. That's another delay, but that happens. And we've already been waiting 4 years. So that's another couple of months.
Yeah. But
we're really excited, to finally at least have all the agreements in place. So.
Great. Good things take time.
Yeah.
And it did take over 2 years to get the authorization from the province. So
yeah.
That was,
yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bonnie. Any more? Okay. So the next one is Economic Development Committee and Committee's Review. Councillor Nicholson.
Thanks, Will. I'll keep this short because we're running quite a bit late here. On the community economic development front, the primary piece of work that committee is doing at the moment is the development of a community economic development plan. And we're working with 2 consultants. We just finished the second phase of the project. So there's a questionnaire that just closed. There were roughly 190 people who completed the questionnaire. There'll be assessment work done by the consultants, and we'll be moving into a focus group stretch in late April, May, most likely. So the target is to have the draft plan ready by the end of the summer, and we're pretty much on track for that. There is an open area within Citizen Lab, which is the civic engagement platform. You can go there and you can read some of the ideas, suggestions, things that are being discussed related to community economic development. The second point, the committee's review. Councillor Kale and I are meeting with all of the chairs and vice chairs of municipal committees. Will mentioned earlier on that work was happening, and we had met. Thus far, we've met with 16 of the vice chairs and chairs, and we have another 9 to interview in the coming week. The focus there has been on the structure, functions of committees, whether it's working well, whether there is some room for improvement, and all committee members of the municipal committees will be receiving in the coming months in May a questionnaire that will ask for your feedback on committee operations. So that also is on an end of summer completion trajectory, and we're on track. It's proving to be really, really interesting. And I don't want to say too much about it at this point, other than when we presented the idea, there was a sense that it would be a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but it has been very, very instructive so far. And I've really enjoyed talking with a number of people that I don't know very well and getting a sense of how their committees operate. The whole notion of siloing keeps coming up again and again, and strategies for dealing with that and strengthening the lateral connections between committees is being brought up often. So unless there are any questions, are there any questions? And do you want to ask anything? No? Okay, I'm done.
All right. Thanks, Maureen. Okay, staff updates from Bonny.
I think I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah.
I should have probably brought up the development permit brochure in this section, but yeah, just busy.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Bonny. And Councillor Nicholson, council update.
We have our next committee meeting, our council meeting next Monday. Sort of one of the key things that came up at our last meeting was council approved a temporary use permit for a cidery at Laura Road. So you'll be reading more about that in the paper and from the operators of the new cidery. I expect fairly soon. David, was there anything you wanted to add? I wasn't really prepared to.
Yeah, no, I think, I don't think there's anything else. Nothing popping into my head that would be relevant right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there was a really good sustained discussion on the cidery project, and perspectives from neighbors and others on the island about what a project of that sort might mean. What was, I think, really good was that I think all one of council went up and really looked at the site very closely, spoke with the owners, did some independent research, as part of the decision-making process.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thanks, Maureen and David. So I think that's it. And this is my greatest embarrassment. This is the first meeting I've chaired that's gone over.
Oh,
So, but it's very close. It's just a little after 1. So there we go. So I guess
so for
thank
next
you, everyone.
Our next meeting would be polled, but should we use, Bonnie, you mentioned wanting the subcommittee meeting to take place before our next meeting. So when you've had your subcommittee meeting that can, or when you've scheduled it, that can trigger a poll? Okay.
Okay.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. And subcommittee meetings, I guess, Bonnie, you'll contact
Carla, or I will contact everybody that put their hands up, even McKaylee.
All right. Okay, thanks, everyone. I guess the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, okay.
Thank you. Will.
See you later, folks.